Christmas Eve was approaching, and the small cabin, hidden among the snow-covered trees, seemed to pulse with a magical energy. Inside, Lucas, an 8-year-old boy, sat beside his grandfather, listening attentively as the old man recounted stories from his childhood. The scent of pine mixed with the aroma of hot chocolate filled the air, creating a warm and nostalgic atmosphere. "I'll never forget the day Billy saved me," his grandfather said, his eyes gleaming with memories. "I was lost in the forest, surrounded by snow and silence, until he appeared, like an angel." Lucas looked at his grandfather, fascinated. "Grandpa, do you think I could find a dog like that too?" he asked, his voice full of hope. "Ah, my boy, dogs have a magical way of showing up when we need them the most," his grandfather replied, winking at him. The story awakened something inside Lucas, a determination to help. "I'm going to get firewood for us. The fire needs more fuel for this cold night." He stood up, ready for the adventure, ignoring his grandfather's worried glance. "Lucas, it's not safe out there. A storm is coming," his grandfather warned, his voice heavy with concern. But the boy had already made up his mind. "I'll be quick, Grandpa. I promise I'll be back before you know it." Without waiting for an answer, Lucas opened the door and stepped outside. The biting wind greeted him like an icy embrace. Looking at the snow-covered forest, something inside him pulsed with a mix of excitement and fear. He knew he shouldn't have ignored his grandfather's warnings, but the thought of being as brave as his hero spurred him on. He ventured deeper into the forest, the snow crunching under his feet and creating an almost magical silence around him. As he ventured into the darkness of the forest, the storm began to intensify. Snowflakes danced in the air, and the wind howled as if trying to warn him of the danger ahead. Lucas glanced around, the metaphorical white labyrinth forming around him, and began to feel a twinge of fear. "Grandpa, I should have listened to you," he whispered to himself as snowflakes piled on his shoulders. Desperate, he realized he had lost his sense of direction. "Someone help me," he shouted, his voice swallowed by the storm. The only response was the wind's howl, mocking his bravery. The snow fell even heavier, and Lucas felt despair creeping into his heart. He was alone, and the forest, once full of promise, now seemed a cold, hostile maze with no way out. The blizzard roared around Lucas, its white flakes dancing like ghosts in the icy air. He was on the brink of despair, lost in a sea of snow that seemed endless. Then, through the cutting wind, a white figure emerged from the shadows of the forest. Lucas's heart raced. A dog, its fur as white as the snow on the ground, approached him, its eyes glowing with a soft light that seemed to warm the boy's soul. "Hello, boy," said the dog, its voice deep and comforting, as if speaking directly to Lucas's heart. The boy wasn't sure if he was dreaming or if the cold had affected his mind. He looked at the animal, feeling a mix of curiosity and fear. "You're lost, aren't you?" The dog moved closer, licking Lucas's hand as if to convey trust. "I'm your friend. Come with me." "How can you talk?" Lucas asked, disbelief etched on his face. The dog sat down, keeping its gaze steady on the boy. "Sometimes, magic appears in unexpected places." "Come, I can help you get home," the dog replied, its tone encouraging. Hesitant but out of options, Lucas decided to trust the stranger. He extended his hand, and the dog licked it gently, making the boy laugh and easing some of the tension he felt. "All right, let's go together," Lucas said, feeling a wave of courage. Beside the dog, he began to walk, and as they advanced, an inexplicable sense of comfort washed over him. The cold still bit his cheeks, but there was something about the animal's presence that warmed his heart. "Do you always show up to help people?" Lucas asked as they braved the storm together. "I'm always here, even if you don't see me," the dog replied, its tone now more serious. "Often, we just need to believe that we're not alone." Lucas looked up at the cloudy sky and thought about his grandfather, about his stories of love and protection. He wondered if this dog could be part of the same magic his grandfather always mentioned. As they walked together, Lucas felt that even in the midst of the storm, a miracle was about to happen. The snowstorm seemed endless, and despite his despair, Lucas felt strangely comforted by the dog's presence by his side. He looked at the animal's white fur, which stood out against the darkness of the storm. The dog, with its intelligent eyes, seemed to understand the boy's anguish. When Lucas, struggling against the cold, slipped and fell into the deep snow, the dog immediately turned toward him. "Get up, Lucas. You can do it," the dog seemed to say with its piercing gaze. Lucas took a moment to gather himself, but the animal's determination inspired him. He struggled to his feet, feeling the icy snow seeping into his clothes. "Thank you, friend," he murmured, trying to summon the strength his grandfather always taught him. The memory of his grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. "When you're lost, remember what you promised." He had promised to take care of his family, of his grandfather. That promise was what drove him to keep going despite the challenges. With a deep breath, he stood up and took a step forward, following the dog, who led the way with confidence. "You know where we're going, don't you?" Lucas asked, his voice a little steadier now. The dog looked at him as if to say yes, that they were getting closer to home. Walking through the snowstorm for hours felt like an eternity, but hope began to grow in Lucas's heart. He could feel the dog's presence beside him, like a beacon of light in the darkness. The wind howled, but the animal's energy seemed to shield him, like an invisible barrier. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lucas spotted a distant light. His heart raced, and he exclaimed, "Look, a signal! It's the cabin!" The dog stopped and looked at him, its eyes shining with joy. They were getting closer to warmth and safety, and Lucas felt a wave of gratitude and love for the mysterious animal that had guided him through the darkest night of his life. Lucas pushed open the cabin door, his heart pounding with the emotion of reunion. His grandfather was standing there, his face lighting up with relief. Seeing his grandson, he immediately stepped forward and wrapped him in a warm, protective hug. "My boy. I was so worried," the grandfather said, his voice trembling with relief. I found a dog, Grandpa. He helped me find my way back," Lucas exclaimed, still breathless from the journey. His grandfather pulled back slightly, looking into his grandson's eyes with a mixture of joy and curiosity. "A dog, you say? What kind of dog?" He was white, with such a kind look. He seemed to know exactly where to go. Lucas replied, gesturing animatedly. "But when I got here, he disappeared." The grandfather furrowed his brow, as if reflecting on something he dared not say. "Ah, Lucas, dogs have a special way of showing up when we need them most," the grandfather commented, his eyes distant with a faint sparkle. "Protective spirits can manifest in ways we don't always understand." Lucas frowned in confusion, but before he could ask more, his grandfather walked over to a dusty cabinet. "Wait a moment," he said, opening the door and pulling out a photo album. The sound of the pages turning was almost like an old song. After a few moments, the grandfather stopped at a photo yellowed with age. "Look here," he said, showing the image to Lucas. It was a white dog, identical to the one Lucas had encountered. The boy was astonished. "This was my childhood friend," the grandfather explained in a low voice. "His name was Billy. He was always by my side during difficult times. I used to tell you stories about him." "But how can he be here now?" Lucas asked, perplexed. "Sometimes, the forces of love and protection cross time and space. Billy may have returned to watch over you, just as he did for me," his grandfather replied, the emotion clear in his voice. The boy, now silent, looked at the picture and felt the weight of his grandfather's words. The connection between generations seemed to come alive on that cold Christmas night, and Lucas began to understand that family love wasn't confined to the present. It was an eternal bond, capable of weathering life's storms, just like the blizzard he had faced. On Christmas Eve, the cabin was illuminated by a soft yellow light that danced along the wooden walls, while the scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air. Lucas and his grandfather sat near the fireplace, where the flames crackled joyfully. The boy looked at his grandfather, his eyes shining with happiness. "Grandpa, I can't stop thinking about the dog. Do you think he's still around?" Lucas asked, his tone full of hope. His grandfather smiled, his gaze distant, as if recalling moments from a cherished past. "Ah, my boy, the spirit of Christmas is stronger than we imagine. Many times, those we love stay with us in ways we can't see." He picked up a mug of hot chocolate and handed it to Lucas, who accepted it gratefully. As they sipped their drinks, Lucas noticed the snow falling outside, creating a white blanket that covered the world. He stood and walked to the window. The cold night contrasted with the warmth of the cabin, and as he looked at the landscape, something caught his attention. "Grandpa, look! Footprints in the snow!" he exclaimed excitedly, his eyes sparkling with discovery. His grandfather joined him and looked outside. "Yes, my boy, it seems our friend is still here, watching over us." His expression was nostalgic, and Lucas felt a wave of comfort imagining the dog standing guard, like a protector. "You've told me so many stories about him. Do you believe he could be a guardian spirit?" Lucas asked, intrigued. "Yes, my dear. Many cultures believe animals have a special connection to the spiritual world. They can be messengers, bringing love and protection in times of need." His grandfather placed a reassuring hand on Lucas's shoulder, a gesture that conveyed the certainty that they would never be alone. As the night wore on and the church bells in town began to chime, announcing Christmas's arrival, a sense of peace enveloped the cabin. "Grandpa, do you think we can do something special for our friend?" Lucas suggested, his imagination sparking. "Of course. Let's leave some food and water outside as a gesture of gratitude," his grandfather replied, standing with a smile. "The love we share will always find its way back to us." Together, they prepared a small plate with leftovers from the Christmas feast and placed it by the front door as a tribute to the dog who had helped them. Lucas felt a deep connection to that moment, as if the magic of Christmas embraced not only them but also the dog's spirit. He knew that, no matter where it was, love and hope would always find a way to manifest, especially on such a special night. The next morning, sunlight filtered gently through the foggy cabin windows, casting a soft, warm glow on the room. Lucas woke up with a sense of anticipation, as if something magical was about to happen. Stretching, he noticed something unusual by the cabin door. Curious, he quickly got up, and when he opened the door, his eyes sparkled at the sight of a gift wrapped in colorful paper with a neatly tied red bow. "Grandpa, look!" Lucas exclaimed, holding the package with trembling hands. His grandfather, still in his robe, approached with a warm smile. "What did you find, my little one?" he asked, leaning in for a better look. "A present at the door," Lucas replied, excitement overflowing in his voice. With a swift motion, he untied the bow and tore the paper, revealing a leather collar adorned with a small silver tag that gleamed in the sunlight. "Billy," Lucas murmured, reading the engraved name. A chill ran down his spine. "Grandpa, that's the name of the dog you told me about, isn't it?" His grandfather nodded slowly, his gaze becoming distant. "Yes, my dear. Billy was my protector when I was a child. He was always by my side, especially during difficult times." "Do you think he came back to help me?" Lucas asked, hope shining in his innocent eyes. Before his grandfather could answer, a soft bark echoed from outside, as if responding to the boy's question. When Lucas opened the door again, he was speechless to see Billy, the white dog, standing there with a look that seemed more human than ever. "Billy!" Lucas cried, his arms reaching out to the animal. The dog walked toward him, its deep, wise eyes conveying an understanding Lucas couldn't explain. "You're here again," Lucas said, stroking the dog's soft fur. "You never really left, did you?" The grandfather watched the scene with a nostalgic smile. "Billy will always be with you, Lucas. He's more than just a dog. He's a guardian spirit that watches over our family through generations." Lucas looked at his grandfather, his eyes shining with the revelation. "So, love and family bonds never break, even in hard times?" "Exactly, my boy. Love is eternal and will always find a way," his grandfather replied, wrapping Lucas in a warm embrace. As the dog settled beside them, Lucas felt a wave of peace wash over him. He understood that even in life's storms, he would never truly be alone. Love and hope would guide him, just as Billy had on that magical Christmas night.